time for the race that everyone has been waiting for. It's time for JuniorGP. It's new territory for teams and riders as we prepare for lights out here at Magny-Cours. Of course, the pace in qualifying was hot. Unlike the weather today, there's a threat of rain in the air, and now the rain is starting to come down. It looks like wet tyres are going to be fitted, so make sure you stay tuned for yet another duel. Of course, we're here, a brand new circuit, the first time in France since 2019. 4.4 kilometers in distance, and if anything, if the racing from so far today is anything to go by, we're going to see a high intensity in the battle. 15 laps were scheduled for this one. But looking back at Jerez last time out, it was Uriarte on pole position, and he did take a good start and he led the way. Salmela was on the move in the opening stages, looking to claim a win in Jerez. He latched on to the back as Esteban fell down the order, and Danish began to make moves. Evan Belford crashed out in the early stages. Disappointment there for him as the fight continued throughout the order. Over the line though, it was Uriarte who claimed victory, celebrated all the way until the flag before race 2 with some intense fights on the opening lap. Zani soon got himself involved in the lead fight while Esteban began to make his way through the order. Uriarte remained in the podium mix throughout as Jesus Rios briefly dropped Uriarte all the way back to P3 at one point, but some frustration there, it was clear to see. But over the final corner, Uriarte, a textbook move, and yet another victory for the 51. But now, as we turn our attention to today's action, you can see the rain well and truly coming down on the circuit. It's a whole new challenge in store for these 32 riders. It looks to be completely different conditions, let's just say, from qualifying, not only in terms of temperature, but the fact that it is pouring it down. Wet tyres will definitely be on this time around. A wind in the air as well, and it looks like, looking at our timing screens, it might just be a 10-lap race. Now, it was originally scheduled for 15, and now reducing those 5 laps, different conditions, something that teams riders, a lot to work out, and with only one race, there's a lot at stake.
There absolutely is a lot at stake. Just coming back from Parc Fermé for following ETC Race 1, it was just starting to spit. And within a few minutes, it has started coming down quite heavily. So just shows how quickly things can change here. Just one Junior GP race, as you said, so it is important that riders get the best results they can in this one, because we're approaching the halfway stage of the championship, and it's where things really heat up.
Yeah, and well, now we're on the sighting lap, and this has been one of the most important sighting laps of the day. Of course, with the Junior GP class, they only get one race. The likes of Moto2 that's here this weekend, the European Championship, and the ETC, they have 2 races. So no matter what, they have a chance of scoring points at least one race. Junior GP, it's 25 points or nothing if you crash out here. The fans, most of them have umbrellas, most of them have coats. If not, they're going to be in for a wet ride, as well the riders. Some of them, of course, as we see, in wet conditions, like to run almost a cover over their levers for protection in the rain. Others don't. Others find it quite restrictive. But you can see the fans, the rain is not putting them off watching the racing.
No, and the locals to Magny-Cours in the region we're in, they're probably used to these changeable conditions.
Packed a jacket.
Exactly. It's what Magny-Cours is known for. It happens when World Superbike visits a lot, even when the date moved from October to September, still possible. We're just seeing on our time, on the ticker at the bottom there, race distance of 10 laps, and we'll start at 13:20 local time, so in about 10 minutes time.
Yeah, just over 10 minutes before we get going. And it's going to be tricky. A lot of the riders might try and get a few sighting laps in. I think that would be the sensible thing, certainly for this one. But the teams will be waiting on the grid. You don't want to spend all your time out in the sighting laps, because at the end of the day, the setup, with it being pretty nice, almost all weekend, the setup for the wet at this track is not going to be there yet. So you need time to get enough information from the bike on the sighting laps, not pushing too hard, obviously, but enough so you get a good understanding. You can come back, give a little bit of feedback, and make a few little adjustments.
Exactly. It will be all about those adjustments that riders will make. They will have experience of riding in the wet at some point in their career, perhaps not at this circuit, but they will understand how they want the bike to feel, which will help, but it could also be new to them at this circuit. And yesterday it was 25, 30 degrees, bright sunshine all day. It's such a contrast. They're not going to have any settings really for wet running here.
Yeah, they're not, and it's going to be these types of situations where you have a very experienced team that is able to understand what the bike needs, what the rider needs, and almost predict a setup in these types of situations. Of course, a lot of these teams are really, really professional outfits. A lot of them have some top mechanics, top crew chiefs. So I'm sure it's not going to be too much of an issue, but nonetheless, it's still going to be a little bit of a concern because it's all going to be about rider feel in the wet weather. If you don't have the feeling you want, you can be easily a couple of seconds off the pace.
Exactly, and also, although they'll do 2 or 3 sighting laps, make some changes, and hope they work, the conditions in this sort of rain will continually change. It's still raining, so the track will feel different, corner by corner almost. So you're never going to have the perfect setup. You just need a good enough feeling that you can get the most out of the package.
Yeah, and well, so far this season, Brian Uriarte has definitely got the most out of his package. So the 51, he's had a good season so far, and well, he started on pole in Jerez, and it looks like he will be starting on pole here today. It was a great qualifying in sunny conditions, opposite to what we have here in the race. Can Uriarte transform his qualifying pace into the race? We're going to have to wait not too much longer to find out, but as they head out, continue to head out on their sighting laps. Let's take a look at qualifying yesterday, where Brian Uriarte took pole position once more.
I'm super happy because it was very tricky, this pole position, and yeah, we managed to get the pole. I'm not a pole rider, but here I don't know, I felt since the beginning very good, and I'm keeping quite constant on all the sessions. So yeah, tomorrow we have a race and we will try to fight for the victory. I think I'm working really hard, and on the sessions I'm going quite well. But tomorrow the race, always it's very on the groove and all the time overtaking. But we will try to do our best, and I will be happy with the results, so we will keep like this.
So that was a look back at qualifying, and well, opposite conditions here today. Just 10 laps of racing await us, and everything up for grabs. It's a big grid, is the Junior GP category. It's the one that all the riders aspire to be. This is really the final step before, if all goes well, you enter the Moto3 World Championship, and it's these types of races which can completely show yourself as a true contender.
Rain is the ultimate leveler in racing across the board. So if you're able to show how quick you are in these conditions, it will catch the eye of some teams in the MotoGP paddock, I'm sure.
Yeah, and well, even teams in this paddock as well. There's loads of changing that happens throughout the season in the Junior GP paddock, but Uriarte is looking very, very strong this year. You would have to say there'll be a few Grand Prix teams looking at him as looking actually on the sighting lap, losing the rear and nearly a high side on the sighting lap. So clearly very, very slippy out there. And Magny-Cours, there's a couple of tricky points on the circuit in the wet conditions.
It just shows how tricky it is to manage these conditions, especially when, as we said, they've not faced them this weekend yet. So yeah, and Magny-Cours is a circuit that does have, as you said, a few sections that are even trickier. I mean, they're tricky in the dry, so they're even trickier when it starts raining like this.
Yeah, and well, for these types of conditions, you're going to have to be very careful at some points of the circuit. Certainly if you're trying to make a move. Now, we've seen plenty of moves made so far this weekend at the likes of the Imola chicane on the flip-flop, but doing that in the wet conditions, going into that, there's a slight rise just beforehand, as we see the pit lane actually now being closed, so everyone will make their way onto the grid, and I'm sure Uriarte's just been trying to bring down his heart rate after that near moment, but there's a slight rise before the Imola chicane, and certainly at turns 11 and 12 in the wet conditions, it's going to be so easy to get caught out by that.
It is, yeah, and as we saw, even putting the power down, you could be as gentle as you like, but grip is so limited when it starts to rain that you can just put in 1% too much throttle and you can have a huge moment like that. And obviously, no one was pushing too much on those sighting laps.
Yeah, no one's going to be going racing speed or risking too much or thinking that they're risking too much. But with this being a completely new challenge for them, that's almost how you have to learn. And I suppose it's better nearly making a mistake on a sighting lap than nearly making the mistake while you're at the front of a group in a race and suddenly you're back down to 5th or 6th.
And the good thing for him is that he knows how much he can push at that particular point because he's made that mistake. That's something he can take into this 10-lap race.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, as they say, it's easier to slow down a fast rider than make a slow rider fast. And making those types of mistakes, it just allows you to rein it back in ever so slightly. You go 1 or 2%, maybe 5% in these conditions, back on that mistake that you just made, and then suddenly you have basically the optimal line of braking. Through the corner, of course, because the lines do change a little bit through the wet conditions. Certainly when you have quite a lot of rubber on the track, you can see riders going off the normal, what we would class as the normal racing line, but that can create, once again, exciting racing because we go through one corner and suddenly there's 3 or 4 different lines within the top 5.
And the other thing to take into account is curbs and white lines. In the dry, you would try and attack curbs and white lines as much as possible. You want to maximize your speed through the corner. In the wet, you want to avoid them completely. And that also just has an impact. It makes the available racetrack effectively a bit narrower, but it also takes away a couple of different lines. We saw, for example, some riders like to take a wide sweeping line through turn 5. Probably can't do that in these conditions because of the curb.
And talking about curbs, I think super crucial to speak about the final chicane. Now, through the weekend, you see riders pretty much riding on the inside of the curves, as we see on our screen. Rico Samela, he'll be looking for a good result. 2nd row of the grid for him, but I'm sure he'll be working his way through the order. It's been a good season so far for Samela, 3 podiums so far in 2025. He's been able to match the pace of Uriarte. Whether he's going to be able to do it in the dry, in the wet is another thing. He can do it in the dry though, but as we were saying, that final chicane, you almost have to ride the curbs going through it, and with this wet weather, you're going to have to be very, very careful on when you get on that power and what line you take.
Exactly. You'll definitely want to avoid the curb on the exit because that is going to cause a lot of issues. Through the chicane, you'll probably try and avoid 90% of them, maybe 95. You're not going to be pushing through that as hard as you would through the dry. And
Hakim Dinesh now, 1 podium so far in 2025. And he prepares for lights out. He's got a towel on his back, perhaps just try and stop some of the rain from getting in behind his levers and making everything wet before the race even gets going. You want to try and remain as comfortable. That's why there's about 3 or 4 umbrellas per rider at this point. Just trying to keep the rider as dry as possible before lights out. Another thing as well, you want to try, when possible, pretty much all the way on this grid, just in case there's a gust of wind. Keep your visor closed. Some riders do open up the visor to have chats with their mechanics, but if you have the visor open and you let some moisture get in there later on in the race, that can potentially ruin a good result if your visor starts to steam up.
Yeah, you definitely don't want your visor steaming up and letting rain in. I mean, obviously you need to talk to your crew and maybe you have to lift your visor up, but you have to be very careful not to let too much moisture in.
Yeah, you need to hope you have some excellent umbrella holders for you just to not let any of the water in. And also we see microfiber cloth as well. It'll be trying to dry his screen, dry the visor before it goes lights out. That, of course, being Zani. Now, the 57, it's been a solid year, I think it's safe to say so far. Yet to stand on the podium, but consistently has been at the front of the field and consistently has been battling within them podium positions. He just hasn't got the result put together just yet on paper.
No, consistently P4 this season in races. Perhaps a chance to end that P4 run by just taking that one extra step, but it's again, anything can happen in these conditions.
Yeah, everything can happen, and even David Gonzalez starting from P7, now number 11. It's these sorts of positions starting row 3, row 4, maybe even row 5 that you just think, you know, I have nothing to lose, it's time to go for it. If I can get a solid result here, it's going to look very, very good for the rest of the year.
Exactly. It's a chance for riders who are maybe close to the front but not in the podium fight, or even riders that are normally just outside the top 10. They'll think they've got an opportunity here to take advantage of these conditions. Nothing to lose, perhaps not in the title fight. They can take risks that riders that are fighting for the title won't want to.
Yeah, and certainly. And here is Casey O'Gorman. Final couple of words with his team. He looks to get going. Of course, Casey, plenty of experience in Europe and back racing in the UK. Done a lot of mini bike racing in the UK, and of course done many seasons in the British Championship. Of course, previous winner of the British Talent Cup as well. But you can see plenty of fans staying on. Not all of them have jackets with hoods. Others choosing to use their helmet as protection from the rain. But still great to see them sticking it out in the rain, because this is the class that a lot of people have been waiting for today. This is Junior GP. Some of the most exciting talent that we have is here on one grid here in this paddock.
It is, and it's a chance to perhaps see some of the, well, to see the stars of the future before they make it into Moto 3 or Moto 2 in a few years' time. It's a chance to see who will be taking that next step.
Yeah, it certainly is a chance to see who is going to be able to be victorious here today at Magny-Cours. Of course, we shouldn't be too far away now from getting going. The grid has certainly dispersed, and now there's a couple of team members remain on the grid. But of course, it's going to be an exciting race. It's going to be one that we're not going to forget, as now we have a look. So it's time to go racing. We're about to have a look at the grid for the Junior GP category. Of course, Brian Uriarte starts on pole position alongside Marco Morelli and Jesus Rioff in P3. Rico Salmela, Danish and Zani start on row 2 as Gonzalez, O'Gorman and Ramestoffer starts from row 3 of our grid. Rounding out our top 10, we do have Evan Belford as Alcinen starts P11 and Pertama starts P12. Abruzio starts P13 alongside Joel Esteban and Michelin in P15. Enzo Ballon as well starts P16 on this one, as row 7 as Boggio, Fernandez and Farkas, as Singapong, Matani and Monoyane starts P24. Sylvan Menzi, Nicholas and Bertola starts P25, 26 and 27. They go from row 9 as our final couple of slots are taken by Lucas Brown, Van Tricht and Uchimi, as Serpa on the 41 starts alongside the number 2. So in total, we do have 32 riders on this Junior GP grid. 32 riders preparing to do battle once more, this time in the wet conditions. We head out on our warm-up lap now, and it looks to be an exciting one. It looks to be one to watch, and one that certainly we're not going to forget for the rest of the year, because it doesn't get much wetter than what we're currently seeing on this warm-up lap. A couple of riders choosing to tiptoe around. Other riders will want to try and just get a feeling, if they haven't already got it, perhaps small changes on the grid. This is the time that they want to be able to get their final checks done, and then of course we can get going. But they'll make their way down the back straight now and get their minds into gear before it's lights out.
Absolutely, and it's going to be an important warm-up just to get that last feeling before lights go out, just to do some housekeeping, and it does impact the front row. Jesus Rios has a long lap penalty to take in this shortened 10-lap race, so he will lose. Normally it's around 2.5, 3 seconds, perhaps a bit longer in these conditions, so he's only got 10 laps to make up that time. It's possible he's in the podium fight, but he is obviously up against it.
Yeah, he certainly is up against it. Mononyane as well will have a long lap penalty to complete for the 45. As well, a little bit of checking, I think it's fair to say, is being done now for the 54. So Rioff just taking the opportunity to do the long lap now, see what the grip's like before it's a high pressure environment during the race.
Exactly, the best time to understand what it will be like in that when he takes it in the race.
Yeah, it certainly will be. I want to get that away nice and early. I want to get it done very early. But you can see championship standings, 23 points between Uriarte and Salmela. Most importantly, that is within the 25 points of one race. Everything can be flipped on its head here in Junior GP. Everything can change in terms of the championship.
It can, and Uriarte will want to make sure that he, even if he can't win the race, he can maximise his results. Today might not be a day to win if you don't have the pace, whereas in a dry it's a bit easier to manage. If you have to finish P2, you take it.
Yeah, certainly, and it becomes the classic question, at what point does the championship leader start fully focusing on the championship and instead of just getting those early results on the board? It's round 3 of the season, and of course just one race here in France. It's the final couple of checks. It's the final moment before we go lights out. Marco Morelli starts P2. What can he do from second on the grid on board the Honda, sandwiched by 2 KTMs as well? 54, keep your eye on him. He's going to have a lot of work to do in this one. As now we wait for the green flag to wave at the back, and it does, and then we can indeed go lights out. So it looks like maybe just 1 or 2 final checks need to be done, and everyone is happy with the formation of the grid. So that means we can get going. So red lights will appear on the gantry now. And we go racing in Junior GP. It's a solid start from your pole sitter. Uriarte storms away actually at the front. It's straight away from the front row of the grid. Jesus Rios slots into second. Salmela at the moment in third, but he is battling away. Marco Morelli looking up the inside of Salmela, pushing them wide through turn 3, and Morelli up into second potentially at turn 3. They crack on the power though, heading down the back straight, and Uriarte, the 51, is absolutely on it on this opening lap. He has put the hammer down, I think it's fair to say.
I don't think he could have wished for a more perfect start if he had wanted to. He's built up a big gap already to the number 97 behind him, heading into turn 5. And just look at the spray when you're not at the front of the field.
Yeah, plenty of spray further down the order, and it's going to make things very, very tricky. And Morelli having the moment on the rear. That's where we've seen the moment from Uriarte on the sighting lap. So clearly tricky out there on the left-hand side of the circuit. Usually the line you would take on the exit of turn 5, but in these conditions, super, super treacherous. Of course, now we make our way through. We carry on racing once more and head towards turn 8. Through the left we go. Casey O'Gorman sitting just behind his teammate at the moment. I'm sure the team would have had a couple of words on these opening laps just to relax, get settled in, because it's so easy to get a little bit too excited and then suddenly you make a mistake as Salmela looks down the inside, thinks better of it and backs out.
So easy to make a mistake in these conditions. Just see a couple of riders running slightly wide through the Imola chicane there. Uriarte's lead is huge already after just 3 sectors, as the number 54 Jesus Rios looks to defend his position but drops behind Rico Salmela.
Yeah, and that's going to lose him a little bit of ground there. And Casey O'Gorman on his rear tyre, glued to his rear tyre, but Enzo Ballon, he's crashed out of this one, it seems. So really disappointing stuff there for him. He'd be hoping for a good result on board the 33, but they'll go back to the drawing board, of course, for round 4 of the season. Ballon, it was a home race for him. He came back after injury, and sadly, it's an end on lap 1 of this opening lap. As now we continue to battle. Long lap penalties, of course, now coming through, and then they can take it. We've seen a couple of them taking it on the sighting laps. That, I think that's going to prove to be absolutely crucial as we continue on this battle at the front. It is Uriarte leading the way by 3.7 seconds. What an incredible first lap.
An unbelievable opening lap. Got off the line well. We just see him coming through the chicane. Oh, losing the rear, saving it on the curbs, and still building up a huge lead on that opening lap. He's pushing hard.
Oh, he's down. He's down at turn 5. Brian Uriarte has crashed out here in Junior GP. The sole race of the weekend, just 25 points up for grabs. And your championship leader, well, he's on the floor. He's trying to get the bike restarted. He's trying to bump start it. He's got no help from the marshals at the moment, just of where he is in the circuit. He's managed to get that one going though. So most importantly, the 51 has got the bike started again, and now it's time to regain your composure as we see the replay now. Tipping into turn 5 and just losing it nearly upright. The front end just locking there. A little bit too much braking pressure perhaps into the braking zone.
But so easy to do in these conditions. Maybe that first lap showed he was pushing a bit too hard. He was obviously looking to build up a gap, and he did, but just carried on a little bit too much. Obviously, that has promoted Leonardo Zanini into the lead.
Yeah, so Leonardo Zanni in the lead at the moment on the 57. A nice little gap at the moment over Casey O'Gorman and Rico Salmela. Joel Esteban slotting into P4. Now, Esteban, it's been a good year so far for the 78, as we do see another crash there further back in the field. That looks to be the number 13, so that's Dinesh on the ground, but he picks that one up straight away, and hopefully he can get that one restarted, because obviously all the damage is going to be on the right-hand side, but it doesn't look to be too bad. Perhaps just maybe a bent handlebar that he's already tried to push in, but here is a replay, and you'll just see the number 13 high side out of the corner, losing it quite late in the corner, so the rear end just spinning up, basically upright.
Probably just putting a little bit too much power on as he tried to obviously gain time, and just losing it that way.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get the bike restarted. It's taken slightly longer than maybe what Uriarte's restart was, but perhaps, yeah, just trying to punch the handlebar back into position, but Zanni at the front. What a start it's been so far. Of course, his teammate, Jesus Rios, has the long lap, etc. to complete. So that will drop him down the order, and it has dropped him down the field as well. But it is Salmela looking up the inside. He thought better of it, and that has played into the advantage of Joel Esteban. So Esteban, a good year so far, as we were saying before Danish's crash. But Esteban has been a key contender so far in JuniorGP, and he's starting to look like a real challenger for the title as he goes ahead of Casey O'Gorman.
He is just moving ahead of Casey O'Gorman at a place where, in these conditions, it's very tricky to. In the Nürburgring chicane, looks like he's got a lot more grip than Salmela and O'Gorman, so he's already building up a bit of a gap. Will he be able to chase Zanni down?
Yeah, of course. Right now at the front, it's a KTM 1.2 from a Honda 3.4. So both manufacturers proven to be nice and competitive in these conditions, you would have to say, as they tip in now to the Imola chicane and then through the left, back to the right, heavy on the brakes. This is where we've seen Danish's crash just one lap ago. They'll go nice and safe through here, you would think, trying not to push on too fast, as we do see Esteban currently holds the fastest lap of the race, a 2:04, and well, looking at the rest of the times, that's significantly faster than quite a few riders out on circuit. A lot of riders inside the 2:08 bracket, so super quick stuff there from Esteban.
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, he looks like he has got a lot of pace. Jesus Rios has come in and served his long lap penalty, so he can now just focus on fighting his way back through the field.
And now into the 2:02 bracket, a 2:02.8 from Zanni, and then a 2:02.6 from Esteban. So clearly the pace pushing on at the front. Whatever you can do, I can do better. But Esteban, he does have the luxury of having Zanni in front. And now Zanni, with the rain, if the rain's falling and continuing to fall, or even if it's drying out on circuit, it's changing every lap regardless. He's the rider that's facing these conditions first at a corner, which allows Esteban to gauge how hard he can push in terms of the 57. But O'Gorman under some pressure now from Salmela, you would have to say, for the final podium. A spot is losing the rear. Zanni staying on board it. Once again, proven turn 5, a very, very slippery corner on exit.
It's the slowest corner on the track, so you have to be very careful putting the power down in these conditions. It does look like the track is drying. It doesn't look like it will be completely dry by the end of this race, so the pace will get faster. Zanni will obviously lose a bit of time to Esteban following that huge moment, but catching is one thing, parting is another. Also, maybe Esteban will feel more comfortable at this point, just following him and finding the reference of the track.
Well, yeah, of course, still 7 laps remaining in this one. Still plenty of overtaking opportunities left, still plenty of laps yet to complete. We're only 3 laps in, and still time for the conditions to change yet again, although I do not think Esteban's going to be waiting around. He's latched onto the back wheel of Zanni, and he's looking very, very feisty. Update on the 51 of Uriarte. He's up into P19 at the moment, actually just shot up the order to P16. So it looks like all being well, some points are still on the board for the 51 in just a few laps time. And here is replay of Jesus Rios's long lap penalty. Of course, very slippery, we would think, out there as he just makes his way back onto the circuit. Nice and safe on there, and just slots in actually behind. But fastest lap once again, 2:02.3, Esteban. So clearly pushing on.
Esteban has the pace at the moment. He obviously feels like he's got the grip to push just on Uriarte. Now it's damage limitation mode in terms of the championship. If he can get into the point after his crash, I'm sure he'll be not happy, obviously, but relieved that he's got something out of this race.
Yeah, it would definitely be a relief, because if he can just pick up a couple of points close to the top 10, if not the top 10, that should be enough to sort of hold on to his championship lead, or at least just make it 1 or 2 points or equal. So it could be a very, very important couple of points for Uriarte, because with there being a small break before we head for round 4, it does mean that if you make a mistake, if you score no points, it's a long time for that to be playing on your mind, and that crash to be replaying on your mind before we get to round 4.
Exactly, and if he can score points, maybe he will just forget about that crash a few more times as he looks to regroup ahead of Aaron. Esteban very, very close to Zani now, and we're just waiting to see what, and he's ahead at the 180-degree corner, turn 8.
Yeah, a solid move, textbook stuff from Esteban. And so far this race, actually, in terms of racing in the rain, it has been textbook stuff. He sat comfortably in second, waited to see where the grip was, and then slowly chipped away, slowly attacked, and then waited until he knew he was confident at a corner, quick at a corner, to get ahead of his rival, and now, I would guess, try and pull a pin until he has a comfortable margin.
It looks like it. I mean, he's already building up a gap just a few corners after making overtakes. I suspect Esteban will just try and build up a gap, maybe a second half, maybe 2 seconds, and then just control the final half of this 10-lap race.
Yeah, and now we can see that replay, see the replay of the overtake, and slightly tighter line for Esteban on the way into the corner, and through the move they do make. And well, solid stuff, and he does lead the field through, but we are just coming up on time. Straight crash for the number 4 at turn 3, rider okay, but super easy to crash out in these conditions. Esteban, let's not forget, he started from P14 on the grid. He started quite the way down the order, and now chipped away, worked at it, leading the field through, as Casey O'Gorman has actually just got ahead of Zani. So can O'Gorman hold on to it going down the back straight? You would have to say it's going to be a tough task. Honda versus KTM down the straight. Who's it going to be as they head to turn 5?
It looks like O'Gorman's just built up enough of gap to perhaps be able to defend that position into turn 5. Obviously, Esteban will use that to pull out a second ahead of O'Gorman, but the Irishman, Esteban has gone wide at turn 5. O'Gorman on the apex. Has he got an opportunity to take lead? He has. Yeah,
nice safe move there from Casey and Zani, actually, both of them looking to the left, just checking that they were not going to clip Esteban. But O'Gorman now hits the front. The Irishman in P1. The 67 leads the field through, and Esteban, he's pushing on. He's getting a little bit frustrated, I think, after that mistake. He just needs to keep his cool, keep calm as Salmela enters the podium fight. He's up into P3 now on board the Honda. That's going to demote Zani back down to 4th as well. It's a Honda leading from the KTM of Esteban, with another Honda in 3rd and a KTM in 4th. Junior GP at its finest, a 4-way fight in tricky conditions with a mix of manufacturers at the front. This Magny-Cours circuit, it has delivered in terms of action so far here today.
It has in this race. We see Esteban, is he going to have a look at turn 30? He goes up the inside of O'Gorman, retakes lead. O'Gorman cutting back on the number 67. We just wait to see how that plays out. Esteban back in the lead.
And Salmela, he's caught up a lot to these front 2. And although that will be a little bit from them scrapping it out at the front, Zani hasn't been able to match the pace. So perhaps the 57 struggling with race pace at its half-race distance. Of course, as the laps tick on, whether the conditions improve or get worse, the riders usually get more confident. And that's when you see the lap times coming down, and perhaps Zani not at the same level of comfort as the top 3.
Perhaps not at this point, but we still have 4 laps to go. We're seeing some lap times coming in the 2:01, so the track is getting faster, or riders gaining more confidence, as you said, to push a little bit more in the closing stages of this race.
Yeah, it certainly is, and that was Marco Morelli and David Gonzalez, who's took the fastest lap. It was briefly Morelli, just for a couple of attempts for a second before the number 11 set the fastest lap. But they have quite a lot of ground to make up if they want to match these top 3 or 4 riders, as we do see this battle actually further down the order. And this is your fastest lap rider, number 11, following the likes of Marco Morelli. And well, with Morelli being so quick, it's a perfect gauge to have in front of you.
It really is. Morelli has been quick this weekend so far. In the drive, we must stress, obviously this is the first time they've ridden in the rain. But if you're going to follow anyone, apart from Uriarte, you're going to follow Morelli at this point.
Yeah, you certainly are. And well, Marco Morelli, he continues to set the pace as Uriarte continues to make positions. P12 now for him. You would have to say, 4 laps go, a top 10 finish is definitely on the cards.
It looks like it might be. In fact, even he's 9 seconds away from Evan Belford in 8th, so that might be a bit too much for him to do. But
definitely top 10.
3 seconds to Leonardo Abruzzo in 9th, that is possible for Uriarte. It would be a remarkable comeback after the crash.
Yeah, it certainly would. I mean, if he could finish inside top 10, you would have to say there's nothing, not too much he could be complaining about an overall result. After that mistake earlier on, it would be a real good damage limitation. But Ramestoffer as well now, as we do see a rider down just at that corner. The Marshals running out to help. We're just going to wait and see exactly who that is. And that is Zani. So we're wondering if he was struggling with confidence in the wet. And well, there you go. He's down at turn 13. Such a tricky corner for Leonardo as the fastest lap into the 2-minute flat bracket now, a 2:09 as Zani goes off to the side of the circuit. It is race over.
It is race over, and that's a shame for Zani. He'd had a good race until that point. We're just going to see what happens here. A high side coming out of turn 13. Probably, again, a bit too much power, lost the grip, and the bike couldn't say yes to that.
And it did look like he wanted to remount, and the Marshals just said, no. Actually, that is another crash, and that is another crasher in this one. So that is one of the Australia Glyphia bikes, as we do have a red flag out. And so the red flag coming out on this one, that is the 47 that is down. That's 47 down on the deck and up on his feet, luckily for that. But the red flag now appearing out as we wait and see. Of course, there was 3 laps remaining in that one as they'll make their way back into pit lane for the time being. That was Dodo Boggio down on the deck. So helping the Marshals push that bike to safety. Red flag appearing out, and well, in chance of getting some points on the board. They're continuing to talk about the situation. Of course, the red flag does neutralize the race, so the likes of Boggio now will push that bike back to the racetrack, back across the track actually at the moment. And that was straight back into pit lane. So the final corner proven to be tricky. We did speak about it earlier on, how tricky the final chicane can be. Of course, you almost have to ride on top of the curbs, as we do see a replay. And actually, it's after, on the exit of the final corner, he just got on the power, lost the rear, spun up and re-gripped, and down on the deck he went. And straight away telling the Marshals, look, we need to get this bike back. It's a red flag in case of a restart. He wants to make his way onto the restart. And the Marshals eventually letting them push that bike to the side of the track. But at the time of the red flag, Esteban is shown as your leader over Casey O'Gorman on the timing screens at the moment. But most importantly as well, Brian Uriarte made himself inside of the top 10. Parc Fermé now beginning to fill up, and it looks like that will be a result. Of course, just 3 laps remaining in that one. So Esteban, he will be declared the winner. A cracking ride for Joel Esteban. Very, very few mistakes. It was 2/3 race distance. Superb ride as well from O'Gorman and Salmela, who'll get themselves weighed. Of course, Joel Esteban, a super, super experienced rider, not only here in JuniorGP, but previously in the Moto3 World Championship. Previous teammates with David Alonso, so plenty of experience, you would have to say. I'm sure he's learned a thing or two from the World Championship. He's came back to JuniorGP, and well, straight away, he's been on the pace, he's been on the money from the offset. But Rico Salmela starts to celebrate as well with his team. as the rest of the Junior GP bikes make their way into the pits. As well, some of the teams take this opportunity to get their bikes warmed up. But conditions for the Junior GP category, you would have to say the toughest it has been so far today. But you can see rider 45 crash at turn 13, and the rider will be taken to the medical centre for a checkup. So that's what brought out the red flag. Of course, tricky conditions for everyone out there, but Esteban, 7/10 of a second clear in the finish up. And you can just hear the celebrations, the delight down in pit lane as the teams begin to celebrate. I think that is for Casey O'Gorman. So big cuddles to mom, a cuddle to dad, as they celebrate down in Park Fermi. His little brother as well down there. So celebrate well, the whole team, of course. A double podium for them. I don't think they can be complaining about any about the results here today. What a day it's been so far of racing. Handshake between teams as well. Samela celebrating with some of the CF Moto Aspar guys and girls. As the debriefs will begin, the celebrations will begin, and then they'll be talking to Jack in just a moment's time before they make their way on to the podium. As the fans stick around to watch the action here at Magny-Cours. Of course, a lot of the hood's now down, so it seems like the rain has indeed stopped. But that will be P1 for Joel Esteban. A cracking result for the team. They'll head into round 4 with their heads held high, you'd have to think, with a little bit more confidence. Of course, next up, we will be heading to Motorland Aragon in Spain for round 4 of 7 in 2025. It's the first full wet race, you'd have to say, today. Although the European Talent Cup field earlier on, it was declared a wet race start. Majority of the field still opted to use slick tyres, as frankly, the rain wasn't as hard as what it is now anyway, to say the least. But we're just waiting to hear from our winner down in Park Fermi. As they continue to get photos, I'm sure you'll be able to see that on our social media channels later on tonight. But a really, really experienced podium in general. Of course, Esteban, previous Moto3 World Championship runner. Casey O'Gorman, previous Red Bull Rookies rider. And Rico Samela, years and years of experience in himself. So the 27 continues his consistency in 2025. And as we head to Motorland Aragon for the Junior GP category next, of course, just one race this weekend, only 25 points available. And with Brian Uriarte finishing down in P10, everything's to play for. But now, as we head down to Park Fermi, we can hear from our winner, Joel Esteban, who's with Jack.
Joel Esteban, P14 on the grid, P1 at the end of the race in tricky conditions. Talk us through that.
Yes, I'm so happy with the race because yesterday and these days I don't have a lot of feeling because we lost a friend, Borja, and this weekend is not for celebrate. I think we need to take respect for him, his team, and all his family and for him. But yes, the race was so good. The track is a little bit slippery, but I try to take a concentration, push hard, overtaking the other riders, and finally I can win. I did mistakes, and finally I can win. I'm so happy with the race, but this victory is for Borja and his family and his team.
And just in Spanish for your fans back home.
Bueno, la verdad que ha sido una carrera bastante difícil por las condiciones y ya que hace poco perdimos a un compañero, a Borja. Y bueno, la verdad que no es un fin de semana para celebrar una victoria, pero bueno, me ha gustado mucho el ganarla para podérsela dedicar. Y bueno, quería darle las gracias al equipo y a toda la gente que me apoya por el fin de semana que hemos hecho. Estos días no he estado muy concentrado y he cometido muchos fallos a la hora de hacer una vuelta rápida y todo. No me encontraba bien con la pista y todo, pero bueno, lo hemos podido salvar hoy que ha llovido. Me he intentado centrar en mí, he cometido algunos fallos, pero bueno, hemos conseguido la victoria y estoy muy contento.
Joel, thank you very much. Congratulations.
So, as we look back at the race, it was Brian Uriarte who led from the offset. He stretched the gap to over 3 seconds in the opening laps, and well, it was a sensational ride from the word go. However, as battles continued further down the order, Samela trying to make his way through the field at turn 5. It was a moment for Marco Morelli on the exit. Brian Uriarte, it proved he was pushing very, very hard in the opening laps. He had a moment, was he pushing too hard? The answer was yes. He crashed at turn 5, a low speed crash, briefly locking the front, and well, he got that one restarted. He would finish inside the top 10 though. Dinesh as well would crash out of this one, falling at the exit of turn 13, and trying to get the bike back into a shape to finish. Zani as well began to push hard. He was at the front for quite a lot of this race as Esteban began to reel him in. The 78 was on the attack, and suddenly it looked like fortunes could change. Jesus Rios made his long lap penalty, while his teammate, well, he was continuing to not show one mistake, not show 1 ounce of pressure. Before Esteban, well, he found the gap. He found a gap in Zani's armour, and down and through the inside he went. However, Esteban made his first mistake of the race at turn 5, briefly handing Casey O'Gorman the lead. Zani looked to overtake him, but he couldn't make it work, with Casey O'Gorman showing great pace at the front. It was a hot pace at the front, although the conditions remained tricky, they remained wet, they remained slightly cold. It was then going to be Joel Esteban who got through. There was a high side out of the corner over at turn 13 for Zani. That was the end of his race, as Boggio as well had a high side at the final corner. The red flag was brought out to end the race prematurely, but of course it was still Joel Esteban who was P1. He celebrates victory, and some touching words down in Parc Fermé as well. Dedicating this one to Borja Gomez, who of course our thoughts of everyone here in the Junior GP paddock remain with his family, his friends and his team. As the podium begins, of course, a member of the Aspar squad coming out before Salmela O'Gorman, and then your race winner, Joel Esteban, comes out, thumbs up for that one, and celebrating with some of his rivals here in the wet conditions. But the trophies now make their way out, and they will be handed first to the team before the riders will receive theirs. But it was a dramatic race. The rain poured down before the race start, and the Junior GP category proving their talent and showing their talent on the grid. As Rico Salmela receives his P3, and he'll enjoy that trophy, and he'll remember this race, I think, for a good amount of time. There's a lot of action. O'Gorman raises his trophy up into the air, as Joel Esteban now takes P1. So P1 for Esteban, P1 for the 78. Of course, the CF Moto rider, the Aspar rider. So the national anthem has been complete, of course. Incredible result this time around, as they'll get their photo on the podium. And then, of course, they will be back in action at Motorland Aragon for the Junior GP category, but still plenty of action coming up here at Magny-Cours. Plenty to look out for, plenty to enjoy as well, as the weather continues to change. But now having a look at how things stand at the end of round 3. Joel Esteban does take victory over Casey O'Gorman, 7/10 of a second. It was when the red flag came out. Rico Salmela takes P3 as Ramostoffer finishes P4. Marco Morelli takes P5 ahead of David Gonzalez and Evan Belford. Leonardo Abruzio finishes P8 as Zeb Matani finishes 9th. Now, looking at the final spot inside the top 10, Brian Uriarte does claim P10, 21 seconds adrift from Joel Esteban. Benaz Fernandez finishes P11, Veda Pratama P12, as Boggio finishes 13th. And plenty to look out for further down the order as well. There's quite a few fallers this time out. One lap down as well. A few crashes leading to a couple DNFs, as we have a look at our championship standings in just a moment. And now the championship standings. Brian Uriarte, just 13 points separates himself and Rico Salmela. Everything to play for now. Casey O'Gorman up quite a few positions, as is Joel Esteban. 3rd and 4th in the standings now for them. And, well, great stuff for them. Zani down to P5 in the standings, and Dinesh, after that fall, P6 for him. So it's certainly going to be a race that we will remember. And, well, Uriarte with his championship lead coming down to just 13 points. Everything can change once more in Motorland Aragon, and that P10 finish could be a crucial talking point at the end of the year. He was able to recover after a crash, but now, of course, it was Joel Esteban who took victory. So not too much longer to wait before action does resume here at Magny-Cours. Of course, Junior GP will be back in action at Motorland Aragon. There was Joel Esteban on the CF Moto, who took victory by 7/10 of a second. Plenty to enjoy, plenty to look out for as Junior GP action continues here in France. you.